Hey there, Internet. So another late night video from my grandfather's desk. So this week, Mesha Mainard, formerly a Democrat from Georgia's 56th district, is now the only black woman to ever be a Republican and in Georgia's state legislature. She's in the midst of her second term. First became a legislator in 2020, I think it was. It might be her third. And she started going against her party on a bunch of issues, namely police funding and school choice. Well, may I first say to Ms. Mainard, welcome. I hope if you have been red-pilled that you continue to study further. The more you seek truth, the more you will find yourself agreeing with conservatives. Whether it be the gun issue, which she has an abysmal rating from the NRA with, taxes, or a host of other issues. There have been some of the comments I saw online when it first came out earlier in this week was saying that she'd be a rhino now, or some negative things. Look, people can change their views. There's even people saying they weren't going to give Tulsi Gabbard any slack when she switched from being anti-gun to pro-gun. People change views. People forget that Ronald Reagan was very, very liberal, New Deal Democrat. I watched a documentary when I was in my late teens or early 20s that even suggested he was sympathetic to communism. And that his red pill moment was actually watching he was taking the bus from the parking area into the studio, and there was protests outside, a bunch of picket line, and it became violent. And he saw people he knew, they were people he knew to be communists. And that's when he realized this is a bad thing. It was like the eye-opener for him. People have those red pill moments. And it takes people time to realize, oh, if this wasn't true, this isn't true. If this wasn't true, this isn't true. That idea, when you pop that bubble, it becomes a whole new worldview that people become exposed to. And so give her time, welcome her to the party, and trust that if we are right on our cause, she will see the rightness of our positions on these issues. As for the bill, the school choice bill, I am very disappointed in some Republicans. Now, while I don't want to say you have to be 100% on these issues to be a Republican, this is an important one. One of my first videos was it was entitled, "Why I'm Voting Against the School Bond, and You Should Too." Because I got blasted for saying, vote no on schools. I will never vote for another school tax until we see major reforms. The bill failed because 12 Republicans voted against it from rural areas. I've seen a couple of reports. Some said that there wasn't enough in it for rural areas. Other reports I saw said that rural districts opposed it, and that's why the rural Republicans opposed it. I'm very disappointed regardless, because school choice is one of those things we push. And recently in Washington, we had another example of people that somebody doing stuff they should not in our schools, and it was quite frankly rather perturbing or disturbing. From the Post Millennial, and I'll try and include a link in the description below. I want school choice here. Now, this voucher was for $6,500, and I read the bill. all 14 pages of it. I'll put that link in the description below as well, as always. It was a $6,500 voucher, basically, if you were in if your child had been in the bottom 25% of schools, to get them out of the public school. But I did a quick Google search. The average cost of private school tuition in Georgia is about $11,500 and change, K through 12. In Atlanta, it's $16,460. So roughly, it's only going to pay a third to half, a little over half of your private school tuition. Calculating that out, of course, it's about $400 a month if you average it out over the course of a year for statewide, or in Atlanta, you're probably pushing $800 or $900 a year. You're still going to have to you still would have had to cough up. And unfortunately, this is one of those things that maybe an amendment that would have attracted the other rural Republicans, because one of the supposed claims was it doesn't help people who can't afford private school tuition. Well, $6,500 a year, it goes a long way, especially if you're out in areas where the private school tuition is not as expensive. Nationwide, Georgia's about in line with New York when I looked at research.com, and New York is one of the top 10. So it is still expensive, but rather than reject it because it didn't get students out, maybe provide more. This idea that it takes money from public schools and now they can't effectively teach. Got news for you. You don't have as many students in your school. We spend about what public schools do or private schools do per student, in some case, by some measures more, depending on your state, on education. In fact, I want to say it's more on average compared to at least Georgia. Why are we spending that kind of money and not having anything to show for it? Yet the private schools can do better. One friend of mine, I'm not going to name her, she's one of those few public school teachers who is a conservative. Her daughter said that she has her students does the Pledge of Allegiance before she teaches class, and her daughter was in the class, and only her and her daughter would stand for the pledge, which is a very sad state of affairs. So this bill should have gotten improved and should move on, get passed, and I am very disappointed at some Georgia Republicans refusing to push it. The Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, he was pushing for this. This is one of those things that he's not on a lot of people's radar for president. It does not sound like he wants to run for it. I actually like him a lot better than some people. He addressed all the concerns with the security of Georgia's voting laws without getting into whether it was stolen or not. But if you don't need school performance, and this bill actually was going to track how the students did. They were going to have to give them one of the standardized tests that's used for tracking students. So they were going to have to know whether this was actually working or not. And I've never understood why people are concerned with who educates the students if your motives are pure. If it's about educating the students, does it really matter whether it's a private school on public vouchers or a public school straight taxpayer dollars that does it? Or shouldn't you want the student to be educated, period? If your motives are pure, that's a question you should ask yourself. But here in Washington, it says, teacher instructs 10-year-old to make sure his email is deleted after private communication about students' gender identity in Olympia, Washington. A 10-year-old. 10-year-olds do not need to have people talking to them about gender identity. All right, when I was 11, we did what was called by all us kids as sex ed, but the school district euphemistically called human growth and development. When I was 5th grade, they just told you how your body was going to change and how it worked. They didn't talk about gender identity stuff, which is anything more than man and woman matching your gender as you were born. Your sex as you were born is made up. If anything, so they weren't providing books like This Book is Gay, which teaches recommended for teenagers, but tells them you gotta be 18, but this is how you use Grindr to get anonymous sex with adult men. Yeah. Don't tell me that this is what it used to be. But it says here, a teacher in the Olympia School District was privately communicating with a 10-year-old student about her gender identity. Now, I believe it was a 10-year-old girl, so female student, if I recall from this article. I'll correct myself if I have it confused, because a lot of these news organizations, I haven't noticed it with Post Millennial, but Newsmax even will use someone's made-up gender identity, and you're going, wait a minute, I thought it was supposed to be a man they're talking about. Because they're calling themselves a girl, they're using that. Even Newsmax is getting caught up in it. Granted, some of their stuff goes back to the Associated Press. A teacher in the Olympia School District was privately communicating with a 10-year-old student about her gender identity, and even invited the girl to her house and suggested she set up a private email account and delete messages. Otherwise, when your mom looks, you will be outed instantly. Alicia Perkins, who was put in a spotlight on the policies of the Washington School District, obtained thousands of emails. Alicia Perkins, who has put a spotlight on the policies of the Washington School District, obtained thousands of emails and documents as part of a public disclosure request and turned them over to the Undivided podcast. According to the host, Brandy Cruz, the emails from the summer to the fall of 2022 is between Jennifer Knight, a teacher at Centennial Elementary School, and one of her 5th grade students. An email to the school staff on April 22, Knight said the student, a biological girl, would now be using he, him, they, them pronouns. Crew Knight, the teacher wrote, referring to the class, has a student who has recently changed their name and pronouns in school, and this email is to inform you that the change because you work with this child in some capacity. The student has opened up to me these past few months and just requested this change. Please understand that this change is his right and not to be questioned. Please also know that they are not going by this change at home. We will not be discussing this with his family. They're hiding it from the parents in their own emails. This was grooming. This is what we mean by grooming. I highly doubt the student came up with it on their own that they're really a boy. Especially if they might be getting different at home. Students' policy now allows for teachers and staff to conceal their gender identity and other related issues from students' parents, which is disturbing. Remember that thing of you shouldn't be keeping secrets from your parents? You know, if an adult touches you and tells you not to tell your parents because you'll get in trouble, this is the same thing. Similar to the state policy, which reads, in general, school staff should not share students' transgender or gender diverse status, legal names, sex assigned at birth with others who could include other students, school staff, and non-school staff. We got a tweet on the article, and I will include, like I said, I will include this article in the description below, along with a couple articles on Representative Mainer's switch from Democrat to Republican. This is what children can fill out and give their health care provider. And a tweet of a picture saying, please call me. My gender pronouns are, my gender identity is, and you have trans woman, non-binary woman, trans man, genderqueer man, agender questioning. Yeah, kids have two things: boy, girl. Note that in this section, the option of having at the bottom for children to decide if a healthcare provider can inform their parents. If the healthcare provider ain't talking to their parents, there's a problem. And there is an article. Knight sent the student private emails, which include statements such as, "You need to get a personal email set up so we still have a way to communicate." Why does this teacher need to communicate with a student like that in that manner? "I would take you into my home anytime you need." That sounds like kidnapping. In case you're wondering, SB 5599 facilitates some of this stuff. Kind of stuff. Sends them off to a shelter where your child can get life-altering treatments that are permanent. Make sure this email is deleted too when we are done, because otherwise when your mom looks, you will be outed instantly. In other words, the mom might find out and complain. "I kept emailing you, but I was worried your mom had interfered before you saw my messages." That's disturbing. According to Cruz, while the emails were going back and forth with the child, Knight sent an email to the student's mother to discuss concerns about the child's mental health, but neglected to mention the minor's struggle with gender dysphoria. It's like this teacher just assumes the parents would harm the child. No, parents love their children. Because they don't agree with your weird gender cult, because you're a degenerate who thinks they need to teach that to kids, does not mean they're going to harm the child. And nor is it abuse that they don't affirm your gonzo views. According to Cruz, let's see. On May 9th, email to the student's mother asked for an in-person informal conference because I'm concerned about her mental health, her self-esteem, and how she feels about herself is low, and I think meeting in person and talking together would help Taylor feel supported. I don't have all the answers, but I was hoping we could chat and see if we can brainstorm some ways to support her. In the following month, Knight was discussing how the student should be concealing emails from her mother in addition to inviting the minor to stay at her home. Perkins told Cruz that the student's family had moved her out of the district, and the child had gone back to identifying as a girl. Imagine that! Away from the teacher pushing this crap, and suddenly they figure out that they are what they are. Knight's employment status with the district is currently unknown. She should be fired, is what it should be. But a fat chance of that in Washington. In a statement to Cruz, Susan Gifford, the district's executive director of communications and community relations, reiterated its policy which allows for concealing gender identity from parents, but added staff are expected at all times to maintain appropriate boundaries with students and allow the Washington Code of Professional Conduct and district policies and procedures related to the staff-student communications. In instances where there is a reason to believe these expectations are not being met, we investigate and take appropriate personnel action. We do not comment on personnel matters nor give students private information. Withholding the private information of the student absolutely must be done. That teacher, the public deserves to know whether that teacher could be around their kids. The school district is known for its radical activism, and most recently 4th and 5th grade students at Lincoln Elementary. Oh, I feel so sorry for all of us that came from Lincoln Elementary, Mount Vernon, sharing the name with that school. We're taught graphic sex ed curriculum by Planned Parenthood, which included depictions of vaginas and penises, as well as intersex private parts without their parents being informed. Yeah, that was not part of that. We got this drawing that if you didn't have it explained to you, you couldn't even tell what it looked like. Especially when you were in 4th grade and the 5th graders were flashing around the bus. Okay? The graphic stuff that goes on now, I recently got on Twitter, and you can follow me there. There's stuff I don't want to share on Twitter. It gets shared because it's in books like Genderqueer and This Book is Gay. I'm like, I can't share that where young people might see it. It's out, and yet, how do I get the word out? If people look, when they passed that sex ed bill a few years ago, I can't remember the initiative or the referendum name. And I really don't think most people that saw that material would want their kids seeing it. There was pretty graphic stuff in that. Additionally, due to shrinking enrollment, imagine that, the district planned to cut music classes it felt promoted white supremacy culture and significant institutional violence. Cut music classes because of shrinking enrollment. How about you cut the LGBTQ alphabet mafia propaganda? Maybe you'd have time for reading, writing, and arithmetic. And we get a tweet here from Aria Hoffman. It says, music is racist. Critical race theory is woven into every aspect of a public school curriculum in Washington State. This music curriculum is being sold to schools across the U.S. It doesn't have any notes, but it does tell you how the music was used for power and oppression. Music has existed in every single society. So we got Washington State Studies on Music Ethnic Studies Framework, Power and Oppression. You got a whole circle here. Power of oppression as defined by ethnic studies focuses on problematizing hegemonic structures within music classroom, including but not including repertoire choices, ensemble construction and culture, hierarchical relationships between teachers and learners. I mean, this is bizarre. I'm going to have to ask that teacher I know because she is a music teacher. In 2022, the district's school board was also appointed Taluna Reed, a Black Lives Matter radical and an Antifa ally, to fill a vacant director position. City Council candidate Taluna Reed has assigned herself with the Antifa extremist Miguel Laughlin. During the recent event, Reed began her speech by saying "F the police," then called on individuals to tear, and they didn't, I said "F the police," she actually said the word, then called on individuals to tear everything up in this effing city. That's somebody that you really want on a city council. So that's the kind of stuff that is going on in education, and why I'm done. When my wife and I have kids, we are not putting them in the public school system. And if you want that attitude to change, you better start changing the public school system. That includes vouchers, got to be a part of it. It can't just be that we're going to see the voucher, a bunch of change in the public school system. We need a way to keep you honest, be able to say, sorry, we're voting with our feet. So Republicans in Georgia, fix the bill so you can pass it. And that means you need a bigger voucher? Fine. And just as a reminder, if you give a voucher to send a kid to a private school, that kid is no longer a drain on the resources of the public school, so they don't need the money. And if you are doing it in addition to the public school monies, then they got more money per student anyway. It's a pile of crap when they say it hurts education. So until then, like, share, subscribe. You know all the drill. And until then, you all take care.